Angelo Miramonti, child protection specialist working for the UNICEF at Dakar and is also a facilitator of the Theater of the Oppressed. Can you say in one sentence what is Theater of the Oppressed?
Maybe I would say some words. For me, it's energy, it's fun, and it's a transformation of our lives together.
Theater of the Oppressed? Who is actually oppressed?
The oppressed is someone who is suffering because of the situation, and or someone who is suffering because of an imbalance of power. This is a kind of definition of oppression, but we don't start with an idea of who is oppressed, but we ask the audience, we ask our participants, who is suffering here? Who is suffering because of the situation? And we get very different answers because, of course, perspectives are very different. And that's why we don't have an idea of a preconcept of who is oppressed.
So basically, everybody could be in a situation of being oppressed.
Yes, and very often the oppression is really interrelated. So that everybody is suffering because of the situation, but there is someone who is in a unique position to change. And very often this person is the one who is suffering the most. Because when you are suffering the most, you really want to change, and you're ready to change. And so these are the people that we want to work with, people who are ready for a change.
Angelo, can you tell us what are the major branches of Theater of the Oppressed and why is one of them, Forum Theater, the most widely applied?
Theater of the Oppressed was developed by Boal, and Boal used a metaphor to express the different techniques. He said the metaphor was the tree of Theater of the Oppressed. It is a set of techniques, a drama method composed of different parts. And the roots of this tree are in the ground of history, in the ground of the society, and they use universal ways to express, ways of communication, which is sounds, words, and gestures. But then these roots, they come up and they become the trunk, and the trunk is composed of three techniques. Is the games and exercises that we use to play with our participants. Then is image theater, which is basically making statues with our body representing a certain situation that we want to express. And the third part of the trunk is actually form theater, which is the most widely used. And then from this trunk, from this common ground of techniques, there are branches, and branches are still developing. The tree is not something fixed, but it's still growing. And Boal developed, for example, invisible theater, rainbow of desire, aesthetics of the oppressed, newspaper theater, etc. So a number of techniques that are still under development after the death of Boal in 2009.
What would you say is in particular special or unique about Forum Theater?
Like other techniques, we engage the audience of the play in the search for solution. What is unique about Forum Theater is that we don't letting them sit at their place and expressing their ideas with the voice and with their brains, but we invite them to come on stage and to replace characters. So what is unique about Forum Theater is the embodiment of the oppression. Now that if you see someone suffering on stage, don't tell me what he or she should do. Come and do it on his behalf. Take the body of the oppressed, put yourself in the shoes and in the body of who is suffering, and show me an alternative to what is happening. And then we discuss with the public, what did it change, did it improve? This is one unique thing. The other unique thing is that we don't know the answers. We have a way to look for answers or to explore alternatives, but we don't go on stage with an idea of change. We go on stage with a question, and we engage the audience in the search for answers.
And Angelo, what's your professional working experience with Forum Theater?
I'm working in protection of children from violence, exploitation, and abuse in West Africa, for working with UNICEF, and in some situations I'm applying participatory theater and forum theater. For example, I recently did it in Nigeria and in Zambia. Where we put on stage a story related to child marriage. We presented to a group of participants who are working on child marriage, and instead of discussing about solutions, to look for solutions with the whole body and to brainstorm about that, they found it very useful, and it kept their attention for a couple of hours, which we would not have achieved with the more traditional methods of just sitting and discussing about what we should do to respond. And it's being used by many NGOs and organizations in Africa on many things, from domestic violence to child labor to even to climate change. For example, I'm recently starting a project with the Red Cross to use theater to discuss with communities on how to cope with climate change. I never used it before for environmental issues, so I'm very curious what the results will be.
The Theater of the Oppressed started in the 1970s in Brazil, introduced by the theater director Augusto Boal. Why, Angelo, do you think it's still valid now, 55 years later, and all over the world?
There is no culture without theater. So theater is one of the universal languages of humankind. And so I think that this kind of participatory theater that is based on the idea that we act every day in the relationship with the others taps into some universal languages of human beings. Of course, cultures are different and history keeps changing. So the method need to be applied, to be adapted to the context, and that's what is actually happening. I think it's very relevant today because it gives us a non-judgmental way to work on conflicts. And conflicts, again, exist in all cultures. So conflict is another kind of universal aspect of human life, but conflicts have different cultural and historical forms. That's why theater, so using a universal language to deal with a universal experience, which is being in conflict, is still very relevant today. But of course, we need to adapt it to the context, to be sensitive to the context.
That was Angelo Miramonti, child protection specialist working for the UNICEF at Dakar, and is also a facilitator of the Theater of the Oppressed. Thank you for your deep insights.
Thank you.